Well, I think, okay, what I want to talk about for the moment is the story. That I think that it's so easy to describe Godard as a filmmaker who's only concerned with cinema, only concerned with technique, and then the thing that I think interests me about Le Mépris is that I find it an incredibly upsetting and sad story. And that seems to me unusual in Godard's oeuvre, and it seems to me interesting that it is an adaptation of a particular kind of novel, that Moravia is not a novelist I love particularly, but that I think he improves the novel. But I kind of wanted then, therefore, to talk about this with, like, I think with Philippe, it seems to me you're not going to like that idea, because I think that your idea of Godard is not that idea.
I never read Moravia, so I have no idea. Do you know Moravia? You like it?
Moravia is a post-war Italian writer. It's sad, super. It's a very sad novel, you know. It's like a movie, you know.
Okay, I think we need to talk about the title, because I think the title is kind of like this idea of contempt. It's an incredibly interesting emotion in real life. You know, when you actually feel contempt for somebody, it's the end of that relationship. I don't think there's a possibility. Why I think it's such a fascinating emotion to kind of treat in a narrative is because it ends a narrative. And that's one of the things that's so great about this film, is it manages to continue the narrative, so that in fact the contempt that Bardot has towards her husband is there pretty much from about 10 minutes into the movie. But then the movie carries on, and all you get is a deepening of the contempt. And I think there are definitely ways in which you could say that the same thing is happening in relation to Godard and cinema, that there is a contempt for cinema that is there from essentially from the credit sequence, which we discussed earlier, that it's there in the way in which he just sort of throws away a credit sequence as something spoken. I guess one thing that's interesting about the movie is it's such a conventional movie. That's the other way of putting it.
It is conventional?
Yeah.
Try to think about the feeling of the film. I think there's something maybe in that film, maybe, but generally speaking, in film, maybe there's something spectral about all the films. Ghost-like, you know, the films are no longer, they're not there. So they seem to be acting with a double. There's the film as an act, but there's something else looking at the act. You know, there's no naivety anymore. I know I feel that maybe that's what Godard is an inventor of, or like maybe the first one we declare the spectral world open to us, you know, that we're all going to die. It's the end, you know. And we can be able to act and witness the act at the same time. There's something about that in Godard, another way to put it, you know, that it's new in a way, and we still live in this spectral world, you know. You call it postmodernity, you call it, you know, whatever you call it, but it's still there haunting us, you know.
But sorry.
Just to say something about Mépris and Tourania, because I think it's the two films that it was Satin command something, you know. The Mépris was someone that came with checks to make it, Carlo Ponto to make the movie. The other one was Gaumont, and in a way, the Mépris is very particular because he doesn't have one of the actors he was living with. In that case, Anna Karina. It's the only film he made at that period without Anna Karina. And the other one was the first film he made without Anna Niezemski. It's something like that. It's maybe because this is something I think that is a parallel between both films that you choose. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah. No, I think about but you see what I mean? Like this idea of spectrality or ghost, like there's something that because it's maybe Godard was the first one to invent this form of a Godard speaking talking about film or filmmaking. You know?
So
You call it para-literature, or you call it whether it's a classic form maybe in literature, but it was an invention for Godard. I know that, and when you do that, when you open that kind of thing, there's something there. We talked about that before. Actors, Brigitte Bardot being the star and acting as a star in the film, being aware of, conscious of their own image, and this idea to be suddenly conscious of. And introduce this idea of a duality. There's you, and there's you looking at you acting.
But maybe that's what, like, we've talked a little bit about the relationship between Godard and literature. Maybe metafiction in literature, there's not enough at stake, because if you make up a story about a story and the kind of story is still a fictional, it's still 2 layers of fiction. And one of the things that I think is interesting in Godard is that he imports these metafictional techniques, but I think you're right, they're about real people, as in there is a real Brigitte Bardot, there is a real Anna Karenina, whoever, in front of you. And I think that that's such an interesting thing. There's a difference between you as the reader of a metafictional text and you as the spectator of a metafictional film, where in the film scenario you are therefore aware of yourself in relation to the actor.
I believe it's already a pre-form of what you call today ecology. It's to be aware that it's us, but it's also us as being bacteria. So it's me, but as a sort of because I'm a bag of mitochondria, that are me today and will be me tomorrow, But then we share a bit of that together. So this idea that there's an X factor, in us. There's us and there's some X factor. And Godard was kind of like this meta idea, kind of is haunting us because it's you say X, or in fact but you can also call it the ghost, or the kind of thing that next to you, that and it's something that I think about now. I didn't really premeditate that. Just a thought.
But is it also about the relationship to photography, where, like, there's the famous thing Roland Barthes said, where he's kind of pointing out that in nearly every photograph you see, the main meaning you see first is either those people are all dead already, or they're going to die. And actually that's one of the things that I think I feel very much in cinema, is that you know that these actors are either dead already or they're going to die, and you have that sense much more strongly. There's no possible way of feeling that about a character in a novel.
Yeah, or lose their beauty. That's another thing. Youth is, lose their appeal. But what you were saying about Bardot is interesting, because I think Godard made Bardot feel that she was there because it was part of the deal. That he, Jean-Luc Godard, the brilliant filmmaker, would never have chosen to work with Brigitte Bardot. He worked with her because she was a star. And in a sense, her acting is pouting. She's kind of like, there's a kind of pouting the whole time, because it's like he had to use her, so he has a kind of a contempt for her, and she feels it. Even though in the film, her role is to show contempt, she realizes that there's a kind of contempt for her going on too.
But then could you put that in a more political context, and you say that the thing that's fascinating about film, maybe in particular compared to other media, is the presence of money. Right. To make a movie you need
lots of money. You need money to make a record too, but not the same amount.
Not the same way. There's not the same hustle.
It used to be more, but not the...
not the same as to make an artwork. And I wonder if one of these...
Well, some artists spend an awful lot of money.
They can spend a lot of money.
Some artists that I know.
And I think that kind of hustle is one thing. To put the hustle in the movie, and not only to put the hustle in the movie, but to put the emotion associated with it. So that I agree that in one sense there's a reversal, because Bardot is kind of the object of contempt and the object showing contempt. But then maybe there is a way in which she's showing contempt to Godard as well, that she knows full
obviously, like...
So so one of the things he's brilliant at dramatizing is the kind of corruption of making a movie.
Right. He does. Yeah. Remember what was the? Not King Lear, but one right before that, where the movie starts with him signing, it's like a contract on a napkin.
King Lear.
That is King Lear,
Yes,
right?
with Manhattan.
Right.
Golan.
Yeah. So the first scene of the movie is him signing the contract for the movie on a napkin.
It's a scene. It was a true scene. You
Yeah.
know, the contract was signed before the film was Madame Golan that just signed the napkin, and it was the only thing that existed between them. He made the same with me with another film of Oliver as well.
I want to talk about the music. I mean, like, what do you think of the music in the main play? Because
Well, the music, famously, what's his name? Delarue. Delarue wrote, he scored the entire film, and Godard took one melody, he threw everything out, and he repeated the same melody over and over again, like the most emotional theme. He just took like 3 or 4 minute piece of music and he repeated it again and again and again. And it's one of those ambiguous things, because in a sense he was undermining it by treating it that way, but it ends up being incredibly moving. Yeah. I think it was just a really great use of music. He probably thought, that's the only piece I like, you know. But also he didn't use music in a normal way in his movies very often. You know what I'm saying? He didn't use music to make you feel a certain way, you know. He used music for itself, because music is complex and has a lot of emotions and it's ambiguous. And most film music is used to direct your emotions, right?
Maybe he made the same that he made to the Moravia book. I don't know. Maybe he just kept some sentence of Moravia and left the rest around. I don't know. I don't remember if he took. I
don't know about the dialogue, but he followed the story completely, you know.
well, it's interesting because I think he follows the story very faithfully, but in terms of dialogue, he massively reduces and reduces. And the other thing that I think is fascinating is if you take the Moravia book as a novel, is an incredibly it's interesting. I keep referring this word conventional is very interesting here, because the Moravia novel is a forgettable novel. It's not. It doesn't do anything interesting formally. Like no one would be reading this novel if that film had not been made, and yet Godard still manages to make his most conventional movie out of it. But it's still completely. If you compare the two, it's like there's no question that the Godard movie has more intelligence and more wit. I mean, if you just think about like one thing that I've always loved about that movie is the long central scene in the apartment where they're having kind of this huge argument, and it's not just that the argument itself is so painfully realistic, but at the same time there are these little jokes, you know, that he'll walk through the door, he'll mime opening it, that there's like an empty door in the middle of this apartment, and I think that it's that kind of play with artifice and also montage, like it's an incredibly long scene that takes place in just one location, and I think there's something quite strange about it.
The weird thing about you talk about the motifs of the music repetitively kind of being super romantic, you know, the beautiful white apartment, you know, these two beautiful couple, the cinemascope, the color, you know, Fritz Lang, you know, you have all the, and yet you have a deep contempt for, you know, and for everything, you know, like there's no more, it's over, you know. So there's a sort of like sense of extreme sadness in it, you know. And remember the beginning, he says after the credits, I say there's a word from Bazin, c'est le cinéma accorde à nos yeux un monde qui se, what's the name?
It's like cinema replaces a world that corresponds to our desires.
Yeah, a world that corresponds to our
Something
desires,
like that.
yeah. And so there's as if you were aware of the trick, you know, and you don't believe in the trick anymore. You know, there's something. I feel like there's something is gone, you know, and we should call maybe a political kind of consciousness of a form that needs to be reinvented. There's also, remember when screened the film of in the cinema room, there's a sentence of Lumière underneath the screen says le cinéma est une invention sans avenir. The cinema is an invention without future. So this, the cinema is an invention without future. It says in the bottom of the.
But then when did he make Weekend? Was Weekend straight after?
No, Weekend is 4 years after.
Because in Weekend you have the kind of intertitle saying fin du cinéma and kind of. And it's interesting how much Godard is always this. Like, is it true? Do you think that Le Mépris is the first time where he kind of becomes this artist who keeps stating that the cinema is over, while continuing to make cinema?
No, I think because it's from the beginning on, he was doing. I mean, cinema was always even in the first film he was referring to cinema. You know? There's never an act without his double. He's referring to either actors refer to big scenes of cinema. That's why the story of cinema is told while the film is where the story is told. You know? There's the same thing happening in parallel. So he's absolutely postmodern.
But then to be postmodern is to be elegiac.
No, but postmodern, it's to be aware that some kind of, as you will say, there was a moment when, with Mallarmé and all the writers, you have to understood what do you do with the death of God, you know? Well, then postmodernity has to also to deal with the form of death, you know, and surviving that death, you know. So it's that's why I was saying that we are entering into a much more spectral world, you know, that we had before, you know. And this is only the beginning of the journey.
But
that's
then
my prophecy.
I wonder if what's strange about Le Mépris is that it's the only time in the oeuvre where the story coincides with then exactly that kind of movement you're talking about. That in every other Godard movie there may be that spectral movement, but there is a gap between the story he's telling and that kind of metaphysical, even metafictional kind of idea. And weirdly in Mépris,
ideas, you know.
Big.
It's also very Brechtian, the whole idea of as you perform, you perform performing. You let the audience know that they're watching a play. And, you know, you don't non-naturalistic, whatever.
And there is the moment where Fritz Lang quotes, like there's this one of the moments I love actually most in the movie is where he kind of quotes a poem of Brecht and says "Bébé," and kind of that these are the two BBs. And then almost it's the gap between those two.
Wow, exactly. Yeah, I'd forgotten that.
Okay, well, thank you for all, and I hope that will help you to enjoy the movie, this great movie. Thank you.